Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the eighth day of the New Economy Summit. And today it's again a very special day with an extraordinary leader and expert. And today it is all about sales and how to sell in this uncertain time. This morning I got the privilege to introduce Marcus Corah, who is a sought-after trainer and coach with a proven track record in drive sales success for businesses. He has been from London training local and global markets, including EMEA, APAC, and North America, assisting companies and individuals communicate more effectively and emotionally with their customers. He has worked across all levels within organizations. Marcus' unique approach to selling, pitching, and influencing reach beyond the traditional method. The key to his success lies in understanding and working with the client's beliefs and emotions. Marcus as well is a highly effective coach and a proven author with his first book. So I would like to encourage everyone to give a big clap to Marcus. And Marcus, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Laurent. So first of all, before I get started, I'm going to say thank you, a big thank you to you for putting this on, and David, obviously, for putting this on. It's awesome. You've had some amazing speakers, and to be part of this, totally brilliant. So thank you as a starting off. And then secondly, let me share my screen, and let's get into it. So as Laurent said, this is really about selling in uncertain times. Now, when businesses have less money, when there's less money in the system, everybody that makes a purchase, all businesses want to ensure that they're getting real value for money, okay? And what do I mean by real value for money? And I think for me, this is about helping them to see that by owning your product, your service, you're going to help them to have a better future. Now, although I've called this presentation How to Sell in Uncertain Times, really, it's just how to sell, full stop. Because no matter what the economy is doing, prospects, customers, they still need to be able to understand and see how you're going to help them navigate the future in a more positive and successful way. All right, so we're really covering three things today. I'm going to start off with a really fantastic study, which is all about how we buy on emotions. The second thing I'm going to talk about is how we can increase the perceived pleasure of owning your product or service when you're out there selling it to your customers or your prospects. And the third thing we're going to cover is how you decrease the pain of owning that product or service that you are selling to your customers or prospects. Now, the second two will come into play once you understand and we go through this study. So let's start off by talking about a study that was done back in 2007, so quite a few years ago now, called the Neural Predictors of Purchases. And this was a study done by Knudsen, Rick, Wimmer, Prelick, and Lowenstein. Now, these are guys from, we got Stanford, Carnegie, and MIT, so very eminent professors in their fields. And what they were interested in doing was looking at the purchasing decisions we make as we go through a purchase process. And specifically what they were looking at was our brains. And they took a lot of volunteers and they put each volunteer into an fMRI machine and took two pictures. The first picture they took of their brain was as they were shown a desirable object or service, they took a picture of their brain. And then as they were shown the price of the desirable object or service, they then took a second picture. And then they invited the volunteers to say whether or not they were going to purchase the product. And what was really interesting about this study is sitting in their room watching the brains light up, these scientists realized that they could tell before the volunteer even clicked, yes, I'm buying, or no, I'm not buying, whether or not that particular person was going to buy that particular product or service. So what they were doing was they were looking at when they showed the product, the desirable product, they were looking to see how much of the pleasure centers of the brain lit up. And then when they showed the price of that product, they then looked at how much of the pain centers of the brain lit up. And they came to a very simple conclusion. And the conclusion is this: if the perceived pleasure of ownership of that product or service is greater than the pain associated with it, in this case price, then we buy. But if the pain of price is greater than the pleasure of ownership, we don't buy. So they created this super simple formula, and all they did to determine whether or not somebody was going to buy that product or service was they just looked at the difference between the pain and the pleasure centers and which one lit up more. So the whole point about this is when we're out there selling, we have to make sure that we increase the perceived pleasure of ownership over the perceived pain. Now, there are lots of different types of pain. In their study, they only looked at price. But if we take, for example, let's say you're in IT and you create IT infrastructures for businesses, there's a lot of potential pain associated with getting you in, because the pain might be, well, I've got to rip out my old infrastructure. So that's going to cause downtime. That's going to cause issues for my people, or whatever it happens to be. Let's say some pain might be getting you in might mean letting go of some staff because you're going to make me more efficient, or I've got to retrain staff. So there are lots of different types of pain. And when you're out there selling, what you want to be aware of is, what are the worries, concerns, or objections that your prospect or your customers might hold that will stop from buying? Because whenever you're selling to anybody, you're going to light up their pain centers as well as their pleasure centers. And it might not, as I've said, be based around price. But, and most importantly, how do you light up more of the pleasure centers? How do you get them super excited about engaging with you, engaging with your product, engaging with your service? And that is all about my second point, which is around selling to emotional desires. So this is where we're going next. How do we increase the perceived pleasure of owning your product or service when you're out there talking to your customers, talking to your prospects? And it's all to do, as I said, with selling to emotional desires, because when we sell to these emotional desires, we are literally increasing the perceived pleasure of owning your product or service. Now, I've got a couple of things to set this up before we jump into it. And the first thing I needed to talk about is this. Nobody's buying more of what they have today. Okay, I'm not going to be buying a product or service if I'm comfortable or happy with what I currently have. Everybody who's looking to buy your company's product or service is looking to buy a better tomorrow. Okay, so the better tomorrow is where their emotional desires can be fulfilled. So that's why it's so important to start engaging with emotional desires and really understanding your clients' and prospects' emotional desires. Because when you talk about fulfilling them, your ability to sell to them will absolutely go through the roof, because you're talking about building and creating a better tomorrow for them. And this really is a B2B and a B2C play. So a new definition of selling, which I just wanted to quickly share with you as well, is selling. In my book, I came up with this a while ago. In my way of thinking, selling is about helping your prospects, helping your customers believe, which is a massively important subject as well, believe they can have what they most want. And what they most want in life is to have those emotional desires fulfilled. And if you fulfill their emotional desires, then you're going a long way towards closing sales. So when you target people's emotional desires when you're with your messaging, when you're communicating with them, when you've elicited them, and then you talk about them during a sales cycle or a sales process or even a meeting, then you massively increase their perceived pleasure of owning your product or service. And that creates a more committed, more motivated buyer. And in fact, although I've taken it out of deck, in my mind, I think what happens in that moment is you stop selling and you start helping them to see how they can achieve this emotional desire, and they start selling themselves on you. And it's a really interesting twist in dynamic, because actually, if you're not very good at closing and you don't particularly like closing, then the irony is that those prospects and clients start to close themselves on you, and they get to the point where they're asking all those questions, which are like, so how do I get this? Where do I sign up? So they really do start to close themselves on you. Now, I've been using and sharing these ideas with my clients for over the last 10 years or so, and I can tell you they are absolute dynamite. In fact, I'm going to quickly, we've got enough time, I'm going to quickly tell you a very quick story about how I first used this. So I'm sitting in a meeting in a massive media agency, a big global media agency, and I'm pitching my services as a trainer. And I elicit the person's emotional desires that I'm selling to. And what was interesting when I did this was two things. The first thing that was really interesting was they didn't come up with an answer straight away. And it took about 20 seconds for them to think about what their answer was. And in that 20 seconds, I was absolutely terrified and kind of going, oh no, this is a nightmare. And in fact, what I ended up doing, because I don't want to fill in the gap for them because it's about their emotional desires, right? What I ended up doing was writing sort of scribbly lines on a piece of paper, pretending to take notes. So that's the first thing. The second thing that happened, which was really interesting, is back then there was a ceiling on what agencies were willing to pay trainers for a day's training. And I can tell you, we more than doubled that ceiling in this program because we sold to emotional desires. So it's a really important and powerful tool to master. All right, that said, let's talk about the hierarchy of influence. Now, the hierarchy of influence was a tool I developed off the back of some brilliant work done by an early NLPer, and he called it the neurological levels, and I took it, his was very therapy. I took his model and I reworked it for business. Now, what you will see with this model is there is a massive, great big arrow that goes up. And we're going to start at the top and work our way down, but the influence starts at the bottom and works its way up. All right, so we're going to start at the top. Now, we all produce results. Some of those results are amazing, brilliant, and fantastic. And some of those results are results we'd probably like to change. And if we want to change our results, then we need to do something differently. And it was Einstein that said, the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again. So our behaviors have a direct impact on the results we're able to produce. So if we want to change your results, change your behaviors. So your behaviors directly influence your results. What influences your behaviors? Well, amongst other things, it's your skills and knowledge. What you know determines the kind of behaviors you can do. Now, what was interesting is I didn't start off life as a trainer. I was actually a director, as in lights, camera, action. And when I was leaving directing and transitioning into training, I could have gone off and trained as, say, an architect or an accountant or a lawyer or a whatever I was going to do, right? I ended up training as a trainer, but I could have gone in any direction. And I would have gone off and got some skills and knowledge and use those skills and knowledge to develop a new set of behaviors and produce a different set of results. So your skills and knowledge have a very direct impact on the kind of behaviors you're able to do. Look at this very quickly from a training perspective. I use my skills and knowledge as a trainer to go in and to help delegates within an organization change their behaviors to produce a better result. So hopefully you can understand this model very easily. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about it in terms of business, because if you are relying on features and benefits as a way to sell your product or service, I can tell you now, it's the weakest way to sell. Okay, and this model demonstrates why that's the case. And there's another massive challenge. If it's the weakest way to sell, then I can guarantee you're selling a commodity and it becomes very price sensitive. So let's put this in a business context, and let me say this. I'm going to say, as a massive generalization, your skills and knowledge are your features. So your features in a business are all the kind of clients you've had, the IP you might have, the people that work in the business, the brilliant things that you're able to create for those companies that you currently work with, etc. And you're going to use your features to change the behaviors of, say, somebody out in the general public. So let me give you a quick example of that. Let's say you're an ad agency, you're a media agency, you're a coach, you're a therapist or whatever. Let's take ad agency, media agency, it's pretty straightforward. If you are using your skills and knowledge, you're looking to change the behaviors of the general public to, guess what? Produce a positive result for your clients, which is a benefit to them, i.e. you're going to try and sell more of their product. If, as a trainer, I go in and I work with an organization, I'm going to give the delegates a new set of skills and knowledge to change their behaviors to produce a positive result for the business I'm working with. It's the same everywhere. It really doesn't matter what you're selling. You're going to go in, you're going to ultimately use your features to change the behaviors of someone. It might be internal in the business or external, general public or a niche in the public, to produce a positive result for that business. This is classic sales. This is features and benefits. Everybody's been using it since time immemorial, right? Now, if you remember what I said a moment ago, if you rely on features and benefits to sell, it really is the weakest way to sell. And here's the reason why. If you accept this model for what it is, then let me ask you a question. Do you have competition? Does your business, does the business you're in have competitors? And I'm going to say the chances are more than likely, okay? Do your competitors have the kind of skills and knowledge that you have? Again, I'm going to make an assumption, and I'm going to say more than likely. So if they have the same kind of features, i.e. skills and knowledge that you have, then the chances are they can change the behaviors of the people out there or internally within an organization in the same way that you can change their behaviors, and ultimately therefore produce a similar result to the kind of result you're able to produce, i.e. a similar benefit for that client or prospect that you can produce. So here's my question. I'm sitting in your pitch, and I'm also seeing a couple of other companies that do what you do. If you all have similar features and can all produce a similar result, why should I choose you over them? Now, I've asked this question many, many times to many, many big organizations. And the most common response that I get is people put their hands up and they go, because we're nice people. And I've got to tell you all right now, you're all nice people. So it's not really about nice people. The challenge with this is that I will tell you how your prospects, your clients make a decision. Because if there's no real difference between you and your competitors, my decision is going to be based on one criteria. You guessed it, price. Because the challenge that I'm going to have is if the result with you and the result with you and the result with you are the same result or as good as, as good as possible, then I'm buying on price because I have no other way to distinguish between you. So when you rely on features and benefits to sell, you are basically in a race to the bottom. And I saw this post GFC. So I was in the UK post GFC. In fact, I launched my business in 2009, which who knew that it was such a bad time to launch a business, but there you go. I did, and I survived. And when I started talking about this and sharing this model with businesses, they were like, wow, I get this. Remember, when money gets scarce, people are looking to buy on what's in it for them. What's the value for them? And it's not just about price. They want to know that you can help them get to a better place in their future. So if this isn't the answer, if features and benefits isn't the answer, because also it's all based on logic, and we don't actually buy on logic. We need logic in there, but we don't buy on logic. If this isn't the answer, then what is? Well, what is selling to emotional desires. Because when I engage your emotional desires and I sell to them, it's much harder for you to put a price on your future than it is for you to put a price on a feature. And that's the real key here. And the other side to this is about emotion. This comes back to the study, right? This is about increasing that perceived pleasure of owning your product, your service. And that's what happens when you sell to emotional desires. So the $64,000 question is this: Marcus, how do you sell to emotional desires, right? So I'm going to give you one way right now. There are a number of other ways. I'm just going to give you one way right now because it's super simple and everybody can do this. And in the story I mentioned a moment ago about the agency, this is what I did, okay? You ask a simple question. You ask, what's important to you about, and you name a context. So in my story a moment ago, I would have said to the media agency, hey, what's important to you about getting this sales training? And she gave me an answer. I've used this thousands of times everywhere. You can use this in phone calls, in meetings. We're going to talk about documents in a second, but the question is, what's important to you about, and you name a context. Let's say your IT infrastructure. What's important to you, Mr. or Mrs. prospect or client, about getting this new IT infrastructure? What's important to you about going on this holiday? What's important to you about social media? What's important to you about sales training? What's important to you about this bank account? What's important to you about? Name whatever it is that you sell or your product or service. Just insert it into that conversation and they will give you an answer. And that is what you talk about, and that is what you sell to. And that's the real key to all of this, because when you sell to these emotional desires, you're literally talking about something that is important to somebody, to that prospect, that client. And when you talk to them about that thing, they are listening, they're engaged, they're committed. And literally, the more you talk, as long as you keep it directly to their emotional desires, the more you talk about how you can fulfill that for them, the more they are going to be buying into what you're saying. So I've got enough time for a really super quick story. So I gave an example of doing this over the phone. I got cold called, it must have been back in 2011, 2012 now, by a private equity firm. I knew nothing about private equity at that point in my life. This guy calls me up and he goes, I hear you do sales training. I'm like, yeah, I do sales training. And we have a chat on the phone, and it gets to the point where I said, do you know about eliciting emotional desires, because it's a much more powerful way to sell? And he goes, I'm not sure, Marcus, can you give me an example? I said, sure. What's important about getting the sales training? And he gave me an answer. And all I did was then talk to him about how I could fulfill his answer. And that was it. And he said to me, Marcus, look, you better come in for a chat. Are you free next week? And I said, I'd love to come in. So I go in for a chat. And he literally, as soon as he saw me, he started smiling. His name's Mark. He started smiling. And he goes, Marcus, you're here to tell me. And he basically named his emotional desire. And I said, that's exactly what I'm here to do. And I just had a piece of paper. I just got my notebook out and started writing notes and showed him how I was going to do it. And he turned around at the end of the conversation. He goes, that's really interesting. All right. So I have to ask, what's your price? And I told him how much I charged. And he stopped and he looked at me and he said this. He sat back in his chair and he said, normally, Marcus, at this point in the conversation, I negotiate, but you're too cheap. That's genuinely what he said to me. So, note to self, double my prices. So the next time we had a conversation, yeah, I definitely doubled my prices. But price really goes out of the window when you're talking about people's future. So just to recap, selling to emotional desires allows you to increase the perceived pleasure of ownership for the prospect or customers that you're talking to. You have a clear point of difference. The reason why you have a clear point of difference is that you're not selling like other people. You're not selling features and benefits. You're connecting with them emotionally and selling to those emotions. So it really helps you to stand out from your competitors. You stop selling on price. We kind of covered this already. Look, it's very easy for me to put a price on a feature, but it's much harder for me to put a price on my future. And there is a big difference. And also, that top half of the triangle is all commodity-based sales. And commodity-based sales are based on price. So it becomes a very price-sensitive conversation. You sell to emotions. We buy on emotion and we justify with logic. When I first heard this, I'm like, what does that even mean? But now I get the first port of call in any sale is to connect their emotions with your product or service, because then they can justify that purchase. I kind of alluded to this as well. You can sell to emotional desires in emails and documents. Yesterday, my good friend Judy was talking about marketing. You can use emotional desires in your marketing as well. And it really puts the whole thing on fire. So phone calls, documents, emails, marketing, Zoom meetings, face-to-face meetings, it doesn't matter. You can sell to emotional desires absolutely everywhere and anywhere. All right, so I've got a little bit of time left. And what I wanted to just touch on as well is, how do you decrease the pain of owning your product or service when you're out there talking to those buyers, talking to those prospects, talking to those potential clients? All right, so overcoming objections, reducing the pain associated with your product or service. All right, so what we're going to talk about in this section is there is so much we could cover here. I have to keep this simple. I have to make it obvious enough that it give you an idea, a tool that you can take away and go and use right now today. So I'm going to give you one of my absolute favorite ways of overcoming objections. And this, every time you overcome an objection, you reduce the pain associated with owning your product or service. All right, so this is one of my favorites. It's called the sharp angle close. And basically what it enables you to do is close someone on their own objection. So when they give you an objection, you can actually close them on it. And it's a really great tool. And I thought, again, I'd set this up with a really quick story to give you an example of how powerful it is. All right, so my wife knows me well enough now to realize, look, I can leave my birthday present or Christmas present to your choice, or I can just get what I want. So I'm always like, honey, if you want to tell me what you want, just tell me. So she tells me what she wants and off I go. So this happened in the UK in a very well-known store in London that shall remain nameless, but think sort of Meyer or David Jones, that kind of thing. All right, so I go into the store. I'm in the dress department in the store, and I'm clearly looking a little lost. And somebody who works in the store comes up to me, an assistant, and kind of goes, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Look, I'm really sorry. My wife sent me in here. I'm trying to find this dress in this size. Can you help?" And she goes, "All right, it's not in this area. Let's go over to the racks over here." So I'm like, okay, we go over to the racks, and she starts looking through and she goes, "I'm really sorry. We don't seem to have any of the size out on the store, on the floor. Are you okay if I go and check the storeroom? Are you okay to wait?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course, really happy to wait." So she goes away and she comes back quite a long time later, like about 5 or 10 minutes later, and she goes, "Okay, so I checked in the back and we don't have anything in that size. The however is our sister store, which is in Oxford Street, does have the specific size you're after. Are you willing to, we're actually getting a shipment from them later today. Are you willing to come back at, say, in 2 or 3 hours time, 3 to be on the safe side? And by that time it'll have been delivered." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's my wife's birthday tomorrow. I definitely need this. So yeah, I'm happy to come back." Now, as she went back, they had delivered it, I bought it, and off we went. Now, the sharp angle close is basically based on a really simple formula. If we could reach agreement, would you still go ahead? And what this sales assistant did was she basically said, "Are you happy to wait if I go and look in the back in the store area?" I'm like, "Yes." "Great. So you're still going ahead." And then when she came out, she said, "Look, we don't have any, but I've checked with our sister store. If we can get it delivered, are you still going ahead?" So it's just a version of the sharp angle close, but done in a really nice, caring way. And you can use this absolutely everywhere and anywhere you like. So you can't find agreement on a price. So they want to reduce your prices, you want to put your prices up, whatever it happens to be. That clearly means you're not selling to emotional desires, but that's another conversation. But if we could find a price where you're happy and we're happy, would you still go ahead? Let's say the objection or worry is, can you deliver on time? If we can find a way of proving to you that we can deliver our product or service on time, would you still go ahead? It doesn't matter what people say. You can always come back and go, if we could find agreement, would you go ahead? And that's the power of this particular closing technique. It's brilliant. And I highly recommend, if you haven't used it before, get out there and give it a go. Now, there are a couple of caveats with this. The first caveat, which is the most important, is use it sparingly. Like, you don't want to keep cycling your prospect or clients through this agreement. If we could reach agreement, would you still go ahead? You want to use it once or twice in a sales process, and use it where things get really stuck. The other thing that you really need to know about this, which is super useful, is that sometimes people hold a objection, but they don't actually want to reveal what that objection is, right? So what this will, the sharp angle close enables you to do is it enables you to get to the deeper objection, so that when you're sitting there and you go, let's say they say, can you deliver on time? And you go, if we could find a way of demonstrating to you that we can deliver on time, would you still go ahead? And they go, no. You know there's a deeper objection going on. And then it's a question of uncovering that objection and then dealing with that objection when you uncover it. So it's a really useful way of understanding how, when you're talking to people, what their roadblocks are. So it's more than just, here's a way to handle an objection. It's actually how you close people on their own objections as well. All right, so I'm going to, I see some questions pop up, so I'm just going to stop this for a second. I'm going to go back for some questions just to see what's in the chat. Your tips on selling. Okay, let's start. I thought it was a play on COVID. Oh, hey, Laurent.
Hello, Marcus.
I thought I'd just check in with the questions to see where we're at.
Sounds good. So would you like me to read you the question?
Yeah, I can see the questions.
Beautiful.
So, Georgie basically said, I thought it was just a play COVID. It's more than COVID. It's really where, covering COVID. Yes, but this applies to everywhere. Okay, it's not just COVID. You need to be selling to emotional desires regardless of whether it's COVID or not. And now more than ever in this current environment with COVID being what it is, money's going to get super tight, right? I was having a chat with a client the other day and they were saying, do you know what our concern is? When the government stops doing job seeker and all of their sort of financial packages, businesses are going to have less money to spend. And the question's going to be, they still need to acquire services. They still need to potentially acquire other things in their business to help them grow and move forward. And so when money gets tight, people really need to have a different conversation that's not just features and benefits. And this is exactly what happened post GFC in the UK, right? Post GFC in the UK, money went from normal money to zero. Nobody had any money. And this is what I lived through. And what happened is when money becomes tight, people stop buying unless they can see very, very specifically how what you have helps them go from where they're right now today to where they want to be. And where they want to be is their emotional desires. So is it just a COVID play? No, it should be how you sell in general. But right now, when money gets tight in business, yes, it's absolutely how you have to sell. So I hope it answers your question. In the current COVID environment, so this is Michelle, would selling to emotional desires be the most prudent course? Yes. So for me, as I've just explained, one of the things that happened post GFC, which is a kind of similar environment in terms of contraction of money, was that businesses just stopped spending. Initially, they went into that, and the main difference between now and the GFC was this. In the GFC, the governments helped the banks out, not the businesses. So the difference is that now we have JobKeeper and the other stimulus packages for businesses, which wasn't available in the GFC. They were just quantitative easing for the banks, hoping that the banks would pass that on, but they didn't really do that. So we as business owners right now, we're in a position where we have an opportunity where there's still enough fluidity, there's still enough money in the system for us to be able to buy and invest in certain things. And the but is that now more than ever, as things start to contract, this buying cycle that people, the buying process that people are going to be involved in is changed. They're not going to be buying in the same way. They're not just going to be, oh yeah, here you go, here's some more money, here's some more money. It's not going to be what's going to happen. As soon as that contraction really hits, which it might well do when the JobKeeper dries up and the other stimulus packages dry up, assuming they do, of course, but assuming they do, then that'll put businesses under more pressure, and they're going to be making just massive discretionary purchases. It's not just everything and anything anymore. It's like, do I really need this? Can I really see how this product here that is invaluable ultimately to my business? Because if they can see that, then they will go for it. If they can't see that it's invaluable, then they're just going to go, okay, Michelle's written something else. In the current COVID environment, would selling to emotional...
Would you like me to read the question? Like
yeah,
that?
Sure. Well,
for everyone to
sure.
really understand and get the question. Thank you, Michel. Thank you, Marcus. Another question for Michel. In the current COVID environment, will selling to emotional desire be the most prudent course to take?
Yeah, so I kind of answered that when I was now looking at the renewed circulation of coupons in exchange for goods and services, well being up to yes. Okay, so I think for me, I think we're moving to a more value add environment, right? So what's the value that coupon adds, right? Now, yeah. A coupon is basically, if I've got you right, Michelle, I'm assuming that a coupon is like a sort of barter trade. It could be a contra deal. So I do sales training, Judy does marketing, I give her some free advice, she gives me some free advice, that kind of thing. Unstable internet connection. Okay. The coupon exchange between businesses that don't have a strong relationship at the start, paper for cash, yes. Yes. So the coupon exchange really is, yeah, it's like here. So I run some things where I have coupons. Coupons offer a discount traditionally. Obviously, what we're getting into with the new sort of economy is an idea around that value exchange. And can I give you a piece of paper that says, hey, I will do X for you, instead of paying you for this service you owe with it. So if that's what I think you're meaning, it's a sort of barter exchange. Yes, and I think it'll happen. Sorry,
Marcus, may I just finish to read the definition? So for Michel, COVID has seen a renewing circulation of coupons in exchange for goods and services. Whilst the uptake has been good, businesses have been slow to respond. Time delay in payment short-circuited the reality of trading for SMEs coupon. And she mentioned, yes, coupon is paper for cash. Okay.
So I think, look, it's a good idea, but it's not necessarily sustainable in the long term. As a business, have to have some kind of cash flow. So I think the coupon approach is good, but I can see a lot of businesses going, I'll do it, and a lot of businesses going, I won't do it. The ATO needs some way of collecting their taxes, right? And I think if we coupon everything too much, then they're just going to go, what is going on here? There was a brilliant case that happened in the UK, again, post-GFC, unrelated to coupons, where people started I shouldn't really talk about this, but people were putting chip fat into their cars. They kind of they changed their engines so that they could take old chip fat from fish and chip shops and put it directly into their cars. Now, in one sense, it was a really useful way because they burned a product that would otherwise sit in drums somewhere and whatever, right? But ultimately, the government said to the police, if you see anybody doing this, you got to clamp down on it, because we don't make revenue, but we make a shed load of revenue out of selling petrol, but we don't make any revenue from these guys just taking chip fat oil and putting it in their cars. And in a way, I think kind of, Michelle, it's the same kind of gig. There will come a point where the coupon idea it's gonna run out of steam because the ATO can't tax it. They're going to be like, look, I get it. It's a good way to go right now, but it's not sustainable because all businesses have a P&L. They all have to, return their taxes and make sure they're doing the right thing, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that would be my only point on coupons. I think coupons are a great idea. I can see why they would get some traction with some SMEs, but I can also see why it would be tricky for other, not everybody's going to want to play that game.
Yes. Thank you, Marcus. I invite you to other participants to write a question in the chat box. And while you are writing question in the chat box, I might just go back to the original tip that we're asking Michelle regarding, because it is as well for me very important, regarding ethical business. Marcus, what would be a simple tip to really touch on the emotion to elevate ethical business?
So when you say ethical business, are you talking about the ethics framework?
Yes, I'm talking about having a good impact for the humanity in the world, and having really a conscious ethic conscious on the business in general. Yeah.
So I think, look, I think a lot of things are going to change as a result of what we're going through. And I think part of that change will be a drive towards a more ethical future. I think we've kind of gone through well, let me put it to you like this. With everybody being in lockdown, the planet has had a breather, right? Pollution's down, the oceans are looking a little bit cleaner because there's not so much stuff being dumped in them, et cetera, et cetera. So I think from an ethical standpoint, there's already been a shift. And I think what'll happen, whether that's a conscious choice or not with regard to the planet and ethics and sustainability in general, is a lot of people will come out of the other side of this and go, do you know what? And I was talking to Judy about this morning, something like the stat I heard was less than the stats she had heard, but something like 25% of people who are in current employment are just going to go, do you know what? I don't want to go back to an office environment. I'd like to do a few days at home. So I think we're going to see a natural shift away from the sort of traditional approaches to the way that we've done business, which in and of itself will create more sustainability because there'll be less travel. I think people will suddenly go, do I really need to fly to London for that business meeting? Or do I really need to have this conversation in Milan or in America? Or can't I just do it over Zoom now? Because you know, the technology has suddenly become so much more, not user friendly, because it was always user friendly, but it's become more used by us, so we perceive it as more user friendly. And I think that, so the things that are happening as a natural result of us being in lockdown as a planet have will have a knock-on effect, which hopefully will really help sustainability. I'm a big fan of, you know, not trying to ruin the planet in one fell swoop, which is what we've been up to. And I do think that we do definitely need to change our habits. And the irony is COVID has forced us to do that naturally. And I think I'm hoping that the upswing when we come out, people will just go, I don't need to fly to Sydney to have a conversation for half an hour with somebody. I don't need to go to Perth to see, I can do it all on Zoom. So I'm really hoping technology will allow us to really start to adapt our behaviors to become more sustainable, so that the planet can continue to have the breather that it's having. And I think businesses can do that as well, because they don't need to get everybody in their offices every day of the week and have, you know, what we would call rush hour in the UK, you know, backed up traffic, pollution, all of that stuff is just going to become unnecessary. So I'm really hoping that that's what's going to happen, and that will continue to happen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Marcus, for your answer. And we got a question from Judy. Can you give a few more examples of short angle close? For one, I'm interested in your product, but I need to think about it. Yes.
Okay.
Very much, Judy. It's a really
good question, Judy. Thanks for that. So to answer that, we need to kind of look at it in a slightly different way, which would be, what are the parts of our conversation? What are the parts of my product that you're most interested in? Because once you understand that, then that's something that's important to them. And then you can tailor your conversation. That's back to the emotional desires, right? And then you can tailor your conversation to that. And then I want to think about it as a real classic kind of like, I need time for this. So there are a number of things that might be at play, which are, you haven't built up enough rapport with them potentially. There's not enough emotional connection and trust. You may have gone a bit too wide on your pitch or presentation, and that's why I'm saying hone in on what the bits you're most interested in. And then you need to go something like, so if we could demonstrate to you that we could help you name their emotional desires here, so achieve whatever it is they're looking to achieve by using our bits of the product that they're most interested in, how long do you think you would need to think about it? And what you're doing then, there's another massive conversation which we don't have time for today, is what you're doing then is you're actually you're using what's known as presuppositional language to embed the idea that they're already going for it. So what would you need, how long would you need before you make a decision? So there's quite a few, sorry, Judy, there's a lot of elements to that question, but the primary thing is understand what they're interested in specifically around your product that they want to learn more about, because that's their emotional desire. Great, thanks, Marcus. Pleasure, my pleasure. And then you just need to sharp angle close them on the time. So if we could do this for you, how long do you need?
Great advice. Great. It's definitely plenty of golden nuggets this morning for the sales, which is the most important thing in business. Revenue is a key, and cash is a king. So,
so Judy said, how do you listen to emotional desires? Well, so if we take your example, Judy, about I'm interested in your products. So my question would be is, which specifically are you interested in? And they're going to give you a list. And let's say they go, we're interested in, because I know you very well, we're interested in content marketing. And you go, so what's really important to you about getting this content marketing? And they will give you an answer. And then whatever their answer is, that's what you hone in on.
Very good. Very good. Any other question? We invite, what is the book you have written, Marcus? Yes,
Judy, she knows me too well. I'll tell you what, I had a copy right here,
It
so I'm
was
just going to
supposed to
hold
be
it
on
up.
it was supposed to be on the picture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to send it as a pic. I just hold it up. There you go. So back in 2011, yeah, I wrote a book. Now, okay, so what's really interesting about the book, just in the remaining minutes, is back then I had a mentor, and my mentor, basically, we used to meet every 6 months, and my mentor came up to me, and we met one time, and he said, "So Marcus, you should write a book." And I'm like, no, mate, I'm not writing a book. And he goes, "You should. You got a lot of really good knowledge in your head. Go write the book." And I'm like, "I can't because." And what I did is I listed out my pain points around writing a book. And all kinds of stuff like, I can't because I'm really dyslexic. I can't because of this. I can't. And they're all excuses, right? And one of them was I can't because if I put all my best content in my book, who's going to come to the trainings? See, this was all the stuff. Now, these are all my perceived pain points of writing a book. And this is what he did. He broke those pain points and he reinstalled a better way for me to see the situation by attaching my emotional desires about being a great trainer and traveling the world and yada, yada, right, into writing a book. So what he'd done is he'd massively increased the perceived pleasure of me writing a book, and the kind of fame's the wrong word, but the credibility it would give me, right? And broke down all the little stuff, all the reasons that are holding me back, which was the pain associated with writing it. And literally, I sat down, I wrote it. I don't know how it happened, but I wrote it, and within 9 months, I'd done the whole thing. And then I was like, "So now what?" And he goes, have you contacted anybody about your book, Marcus? And I'm like, "No." "Do I self-publish?" And he goes, "No, get a publisher." So literally the first person I spoke to said, "Yeah, we'll publish it for you." So it's a classic example of everything that this presentation has actually been about. Break the reasons, the pain, and elevate the the emotional desires. It works a treat every time. So yes. Thanks for the plug, Judy, by the way. That was awesome.
Yes, thank you, Judy. And thank you so much, Marcus, because it is a great tip. I'm finalizing as well. I'm a co-writer of a book, and it's exactly as well a bit what helped me to get to the end of this book. So it's a great tips that you've been given, and as well the authenticity from experience of those tips. It's extraordinary. It's the best. And definitely it's from experience that we get the most of learnings. So thank you for sharing. And where can we find this book, Marcus?
Oh, so what I'll do is I'll give you a link for in the show notes. I don't know what you call it. Show notes is webinar notes, whatever.
Yes. Yeah, maybe we'll send it to all registrants. We'll send it to all registrants with the email, like we do for all the speakers, with the detail of cookies and more tips and helps from all our extraordinary speakers. So we'll do that for you, Marcus, and like that, everyone can have a look on your book and really increase their competency and capabilities in selling through the master. You are the master in selling. So
oh my God! Thanks, Laurent. So look, just from me, I just wanted to say, awesome job putting this on. I mean, I know how difficult it is corralling a load of speakers like us, and then there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see and people don't realize. So thank you for putting this on. Awesome job. And also, you know what, thank you to you and Dave as well for inviting me to be part of this. It's what I talk about, I've just been talking about for a while, and it's something I'm passionate about. At the end of the day, it's getting a message out that makes the difference, right? If I can help one person who watches this either today or tomorrow or next week or next month, and they go away and they try this and it works and they improve their business, job done for me, okay? But I only get that through being part of what you've put on, which is amazing. And you've had amazing speakers, and it's great for us all to be having this opportunity to learn from each other. So thank you, buddy. Couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you so much from all my heart. I'm so happy that you join us. And just for people, when I saw Marcus the first time on one of his presentation, straight away I was inspired on all his tips and expertise and experience. So it's I'm very grateful that you are here with us and that you're helping all the attendees and as well the people that will watch this video. So we're gonna wrap it up. I wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you again so much, Marcus. Thank you, everyone. And tomorrow we'll be on the VC side with Caitlin Isle. And so I encourage you to join us as well tomorrow. I wish you all a wonderful day. And thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.